Hello and g'day. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to make a fabric journal cover from scratch in under 2 hours. That's right. I reckon you can do this in under 2 hours. I've got everything I need right here to show you how I'm going to make this. I'm going to use a hardcover bookboard with a fabric covered over the top. I'm making this video for you because I want to see you make the junk journal that some of you have been a little bit afraid of getting started on. It's amazing to see the difference of a flat piece of fabric to the finished cover. Now I'm going to start off with talking a little bit about the bookboard and then we'll come back to the fabric. The bookboard I'm using today is 1/8 of an inch thick. So it's quite heavy and it's a good quality bookboard from the art supply shop. You can also use it's a lighter bookboard. I'd say that's probably 1 millimeter thick. And I got this here from the printers in our local town. And what you can do to use this one is just glue a few sheets together at a time and then cut out the shape of your bookboard so that all of the edges are nice and neat and you get a good adhered line, if you like. So I've got 3 pieces glued together here, but you'd only need 2 to bring it up to 1/8 of an inch or just under. How thick you make it is entirely up to you. But if you're covering it with fabric, you want it to have a little bit of weight to it, just a little bit, not too light. So this 1 layer of cereal box, I would think for a hard cover, like the style that I'm going to show you today, is probably just a little bit too light. So I'd like to see you glue a few of these sheets together, 2 or 3, might be a good weight to get you something a bit sturdy to use to cover with your fabric. By the time you put your fabric on the outside and your paper lining on the inside, it'll firm up even more. So you can use cereal boxes, you just need to glue them together and layer them up. So if you don't have access to the bookboard, use a substitute. Now about the fabric. I'm going to use this one today. This is 100% cotton. In Australia, we have Spotlight. We don't have too many varieties in the country, so I have to wait to go to the city and I just grab myself 100% cotton. So that's the piece I've got here. What I've done is I've just coloured it myself. So I've got this piece here and I'm going to do a video later on to show you how I colour my own cotton. This is quite a grungy piece. I've made this in another video and I think my snippet roll goes with that quite well. Colouring your own cotton is a good way to match it up with something that you've already made. So this is a piece I'm going to use for the demo today. This piece here is from the same piece of white cotton material. The difference with this one is I've turned it into a book cloth. So you'll see a little bit of the heat and bond there. I've peeled the tissue paper back off. So you've got your cotton fabric, you heat set the heat and bond on your fabric and the tissue paper on the back of that. That turns it into a book cloth, which helps stop the glue from seeping through to your fabric when you're gluing it onto your book boards. This one here is 𝗟𝗓 silk, and I'll do this one in another video as well. This one here is also 100% cotton. This was sent to me by Elizabeth. Elizabeth is one of our admins at Junk Journal Ideas. This is absolutely a beautiful piece of cotton. I've made a mini journal out of it already, just to show you. So I've lined it, I haven't finished it. So the front and the back, and that was also done with no book cloth on the back. The technique I'm going to show you today will also have no paper on the back. I'll be gluing the book board directly to this fabric, but I'll be using a technique that is so gentle that the glue doesn't press or seep through the fabric. I'll make another cover in a new video using my DIY book cloth. All book cloth is the fabric with tissue paper or Japanese paper adhered to the back before we cover our book board. So just in case gluing this book board directly to the fabric isn't the technique for you, I'll show you how to do that in another video. So now I'm going to show you how to cut out your book board. The book size that I'm creating today is 7 3/4 inches high by 5 inches wide. The spine's the same, 7 3/4 inches high by 1 1/4 inches wide. When you cut this out, you need 2 pieces, a front and a back, and the third piece you need your spine. When you're cutting out your pieces, just make sure they're square so that the height from there to there and there to there is identical. Don't cut your pieces out crooked because it will show. This is a guide that I've made up. The front is always on your left because when you open your book, that is how you open your book. There's your spine there like that. All right, so that's how you open it. That's why your front is always on your left and your back is on your right. This thinner line and this thinner line are your hinges, which are these lines here. What happens is when we need to make our book up, those hinges are left away from the spine. So there's nothing there. When we put the fabric on these covers, the fabric will fill in that gap on the outside. And when we put our paper lining on the inside, the paper lining will fill that gap on the inside. So all the way through this construction, when we're making this journal, there'll be nothing in there but the fabric on the outside and the paper on the inside. No cardboard will stay in there while we're making it. So what I do to help while I'm making it is I make 2 little spaces 1/4 inch wide, because that is how wide we're going to make these gaps when we cut them out. So for you, all I want you to do is cut these 3 pieces out to get ready to make this along with me. So you can pause the video as we go along. I do have a guide of all of the measurement here in inches and millimeters on my website. So you can go and grab that. It'll be the exact same size as this. Now we've got this cut out. Well, we can pretend that you've cut yours out. I've got mine cut out. I've got a tip for you. When you go to my website to get the guide to make this size book cover, I've made it this size so that if you use an A4 piece of paper or a letter-sized piece of paper, that it's going to fit this cover. What happens when you fold an A4 piece of paper in half is, if you use a printable like this is a printable from 𝗟𝗂𝗵𝗏𝗍's coffee background kit. I'll put the link below. Go and have a look at this. I love this kit. It's got some beautiful colors. It's easy to use, and if you haven't got any tea dyed or coffee dyed paper, this is good to put in your journals. When you fold an A4 in half, you've got A5 sheets. So I've made the covers with this in mind. It fits in this cover and it's oversized. So what happens is when you print and your printer prints with a border, you've still got enough room for it to fit inside this cover, and you trim it back. So you've got all your pages stacked in together, and then you trim it back to fit inside your cover. I've got a video on signatures, so you can go and have a look at that to see how many signatures you need to fit in certain spaces in the spine. So that is the reason that I've made it this size book. If you want to make a bigger book, what you have to then do is make sure that you can use bigger sheets of paper. You might need to use book pages that are larger, and you might have to use A3 size pieces of paper instead of A4. So that's just a little tip that you need to work on if you're going to make a book cover bigger than this. So I bring my fabric up to the table. I work out which way I want to cut it out. So if I want it that way, if that's going to be my front or my back, because when you are making your book, we're working on the inside. So we're going to have our covers facing like this here. So this is going to be our front on this side. So I want you to take notice of that. However you lay your fabric down, don't mess up and build it upside down where you think, oh, I want that to be my front. I really like that piece there. And then you turn it over, but in actual fact, that's your back. All right, so do take notice of that when you're getting ready to cut this out and glue it down. Okay, so you've got to look at it like the left side is your front. If you're choosing a fabric that there is no pattern on it, it doesn't really matter. It's just goes any which way. You can just use that. It doesn't matter. The same goes for this. So I'm really not too concerned. If you've got a right and a wrong way of your fabric, give that some thought. So we know that we're going to put our front there, our gap, our spine, our gap, and our back. Right, now when I measure mine out, I use my guide here to measure around. I need to have a 1-inch border all the way around my guide, and that is so that I can fold my fabric to the inside of my book cover. Okay, now if you don't have a guide, you're going to use your actual book cover. What you need to do is have your spaces in place in between the spine and your covers. All right, you make sure they're level at the top, and then you go and mark around all the way around your book cover a 1-inch border all the way around. All right, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a shortcut. I'm just going to put them aside for a little while, and I'm going to use my guide. So if you want to save some fabric to make another project, you can put your book over to the side. If it doesn't bother you, you can put it smack bang in the middle. I'm just going to put it about there, and I'm going to trace around my guide, but on the outside of this ruler, okay, because that's where I'm adding my 1-inch border. Same on here. I'm also just going to mark the center line here and the center line here. Now what that will do is when I come back later to put the spine on here, I know it's going to match up to the center and I won't have to come back and measure my fabric. Oh, I got it a little bit offline there. Make sure it is in the center. That's a bit better. It's hard when I can't put my head over my work. Okay, we'll just have a little look at that. Work out which one I want to be my front and which one I want to be my back. I think that looks a bit interesting. I'm going to go Oh, look, a really good way to look at it is to go like that and think, I'm going to do it that way. Now I'm going to get my spine and I'm going to mark the center of my spine because we're moving along pretty good. Going to mark it on the top and the bottom. And that lines up with that center mark there, and it lines up with that center mark there. Now I'm going to glue this onto the fabric, directly onto it. I'm using the 𝗟𝗏𝗡 fabric glue. In Australia we get this from Spotlight. I've transferred that into a squeezy bottle, and this is the 𝗷𝗂𝗃𝗃𝗏𝗃 squeezy bottle. It's got a lovely fine metal tip, and that metal tip just lets the right amount of glue out so I don't over glue when I'm using fabric. It's fantastic. Now the equivalent to this is Fabri-Tac. I like using this because it glues paper to fabric really well. So I'm just going to put squiggly lines down my spine bookboard, up around there. Another thing I can do when I'm using this is I don't have to put the lid back on when I'm using this squeezy bottle. I'm going to turn it off to the side so I can line that up there and there. I'm not going to press down heavy. Make sure it's centered. I'm just going to flatten it very carefully there like that. Now the reason I'm just taking it very easy is because if you push with your fingers, I'll show you something. See my finger, the colour of my finger is normal, right? Just pinky colour. See how it's gone white? I'm pressing way too hard. Don't press like that. If you press like that on there, it will push the glue through to the fabric. So use all of your fingers and just press lightly. You don't want to see your fingers change colour. If they change colour, you're pressing way too heavy. All right, so a light touch. Okay, now I'll show you a little sample piece of what will happen if you overuse the glue and push on it. Okay, so I've got a little piece of bookboard. I'm going to overglue it. I'm going to pick up my piece of fabric. I'm going to squish that on and start pushing it with my finger. See, I've pushed in with my finger and the glue comes straight through. I can even feel it on my finger. Same bookboard, same glue, same fabric. I've done everything the same. The only difference is I overglued it and I got really heavy-handed with my fingers, and that will ruin it. See, everywhere else I did not touch it. I did not push it down. Everywhere else was fine. So there is a classic example of what will happen if you overglue and press too hard. Come back and put some glue into the center of your backboard and then around the edge. Right, now we've got to put the spacer back in because we need to leave a gap right here. Let's do that and pop that into place. Line it up with the top here. The way I do that is I pull my spacer down, I get my guide back, and I do it like that. So that way I know that it's going to be level every time. Same again, just pat, gentle pat. Leave your spacer in there and do that. Little bit of glue, needs to have a little bit of pressure there, not very much at all. Squiggles again, around the edge. pop that, whoops, I need me, this is a good reminder having your guide, I need me spacer. This fabric glue, it grabs on pretty quick. Patting, not pressing. Okay, and I know it's level at the top because of my guide. Rightio, we're good to move on to the next stage. I'm going to just hold my finger on there and remove my spacer for my little hinges there. And we're ready to start folding the fabric over to the inside of the cover. I'll just give you a peek at the other side of the fabric to show you that there's no glue come through, and I am not going to touch that. You can use the PVA glue or you can use the fabric glue. I prefer not to use the PVA glue here on the fabric because it has more tendency to seep through the fabric. I prefer to use this fabric glue. The PVA glue, if you do use it, make sure you get the one that's got the pH balance in it, no acid. All right, because what that will do, it will stay flexible, and this glue here also stays flexible over time. If you use a normal white glue that's designed for paper, it will come through your fabric, possibly, and it will go brittle over time and crack and start giving away. So it's best to use this type of glue. Okay, I'm back to miter the corners. Now, mitering the corner is that. What that is turning the fabric over here, but getting rid of this bulky bit of fabric. We don't want that there. So we're going to cut that corner off. When you cut the corner off and fold it like that, it's called mitering the corner. When you turn it over that way, it's a nice, neat finish. This is what I'm going to teach you today. I want you to practice doing this. You can get some bookboard out and practice this so that you can actually achieve this on paper or fabric. Once you've got this down pat, you're good to go. If you don't get this down pat, you can always come back along and put a corner trim over the top of that. So don't panic too much while you're learning until you get it right. If you need to, you can cover it up. So it's not the end of the world if your corners don't turn out perfect straight away. I've made a jig. I've got this on video on how to make this jig. On that video, I've showed you a 1/8 jig for paper. So if your bookboard, like this one, is 1/8 of an inch thick, we make a jig for a 1/8 of an inch mitered corner. Because we're using fabric today, fabric's always a little bit thicker sometimes, not always. Sometimes it's a little bit thicker and behaves differently to paper. So I like to have 1.5 times the bookboard. So what I've done is I've made another jig that's 3/16 from the corner to there. So when we cut off the corner, it's going to be out just that little bit further. And I'll show you here what I mean. From there to there is 1/8 of an inch. I want half of that. I want to add it to that 1/8 of an inch, which comes out that little bit further, which is 3/16. So we're adding just a tiny little bit on the diagonal here before we cut off this corner. All right, so I put my jig on the corner because if you look at it like this, you can see that this jig is the shape of the corner. When I turn it over, that area there fits the corner. So then I just get my knife and run it along this area here. That then cuts off that bulky bit of fabric that I just showed you a minute ago and removes it so that when we do glue this down, we don't have all that fabric there. So we go all the way around and do that on every piece. You just need to make sure that it's snug on your corner. Because if it's not, you'll cut out a crooked corner. It just makes short work. You can do it by eye, you can do it by hand and just cut it straight across like that if you wanted to. Okay, so again we go back and work out which is the front and which is the back. I decided that was going to be my front and that was going to be my back. So we always glue down the two short ends first. So I'm going to start at the back, and that is so that if you start at the back, you're going to get a bit of practice in first. So you're not going to see the back of the book first, you're always going to look at the front. So start at the back first and on your short side. We're going to put a bead of glue along that book board there. And then up, follow that angle, and follow down there. Squiggles. And a bead of glue across the top of the board. And I like to put a little bit of glue in that corner. Not much at all. Fold it over. This is where you've also got to be careful. Remember what I said about pushing down with your fingers? If you push down with your fingers there, you'll get glue pushing through there. So just use your fingers here to pull this area down. Get your bone folder and just smooth it out. Not too heavy. Turn it around. And put a little bead of glue along that edge again, right in the trench. Follow the angles, away from the edge, squiggles, up on the book board, fold it over, grabbing it on the bottom here and on the bottom here and pulling it down. Try not to put your fingers on that edge where that glue is. I'll show you what happens when you do. I'll do it on a sample piece. But I don't want to stop while I'm halfway through this, but I'll show you in a minute. Okay, so that is our back, that is our front. So I'm going to start at the bottom again to do this next fold here. So the first thing I'm going to do is get a little bit of glue in the corner of this one. Not squeezing much at all. Run it up along here. Same on that end, not much at all. All the way down. Across the top. Squiggles. Now what I'm going to do is I want to get this here. I'm going to come in close for this one because this is the serious bit. We're going to push that corner down and in, down and lay it flat and turn it into a bit of a V. See there, it's laying flat on top of that board, and I've pressed it to form a V. See that? So it's covering up the corner nicely. And then I'm going to put the tiniest, I'm going to start my glue off in there and put another tiny bit of glue on there because I don't want too much at all. I'm going to do the same on the other side. Push it down. Use your fingernails if you want to. Put a tiny bit of glue. Start in here if you really need to get it going and then come back to there. Whoopsie, I was off screen. Start in here, put a little bit of glue on that V again, and then fold it over in the middle, bringing it all down until you get that nice sharp corner happening. Pull that down there, pull that down, and then I'm going to push it. I'm not going to flatten it too much because that glue will want to come out. And then I'm just going to start flattening it like that here. And push that down a bit because that glue's all but dry. And there's my mottled corners. Now I'm going to do exactly the same on the other end. I'm going to put a little bit of glue in that triangle-y part. Okay. I'm going to squish it in to the book board so it lays nice and flat. And it gives me a sharp corner. Right, you can see that corner there. Right, when you fold it over, you can see how it goes. I'll do it without glue on it so you can actually see how the corner goes. A little bit of glue in that one. Do the same. Push it in. We'll use the bone folder. And I'll run a bead of glue all the way up the book board again. Up those angle bits. We made a mess of that. And along the book board. Tiny weeny bit of glue on those triangles because I want them to lay nice and flat, and I'm just using the glue that was left over on the tip. I didn't add any more. And then I'm going to grab it in the middle, fold it over there, not touching that edge, bring this one over, bring this one over. Didn't fold down real good, that one, so I'm going to work on it a little bit better. Use my bone folder to tease it a little bit. A little bit of glue. And then I'm going to make the fabric sort of tease out in the middle. And then we've got those corners pretty done it all. See how that one there's got a little point on it? I've left that one there, and I'll show you a close-up just so you can see that before it dries, that one hasn't got it, but before it dries, what you do is you just get your bone folder and you just reshape it. And there you go. So just use your fingers and your bone folder to reshape any of those ones that don't go and lay down, because while that glue is really wet, I don't like to do that, but as soon as it starts to dry a bit, it actually grabs a bit better. So that one there has started to dry a bit more. Some corners turn out better than others, and some, if we look at them too close, we think, ooh, ooh. And then we go here And here we get a little bit of shape in that hinge, get a bit of definition there. And we got ourselves a pretty cool cover. And there is our fabric cover on the outside, and all that's left to do now is cover the inside. Now all that's left to do is line the inside of the cover, and I've chosen this scrapbook paper. It's a 12 by 12 sheet and it's white on the back side, and I am going to cut it in one full sheet, so that it's just going to take up this whole area. Corners are dog-eared a bit, so I'm just going to cut them off first. Let me get my square ruler out. So I'm just going to cut off that big heading because I don't particularly want that there. And I think I might cut off a little bit of this side piece here because I don't want that either. You put your paper on your first corner and then have it go down into that hinge, and just put a little marker about where you want it to come on this side of the paper. So I only need to trim off a tiny little bit on this side. So I'm going to trim that back there because it's not so much a measurement sort of happening. I'm just trimming it to fit that particular cover. So I'm going to square this one off as well. And the 12 by 12s fit this particular cover just nicely. All right, so we've got a decent little border around that. So whatever your border is from that side to that side, you want to have a similar border from the top to the bottom. So you just sit it in the corner again and measure that way. Now this time we're going to square it off, cutting it that way. And this will give us the height. So I'm going to cut straight across there. And that will give me the piece that I want to line with. Now the lining happens pretty quickly, so we're just going to put that there. To make sure I'm putting it in the right way, I'm just going to flip it straight like that, pull my cover out of the way and put my glue directly on the back of here. Now I have a plan when I do this as well. I'm just going to put the glue on the front, down the spine and on the back, and then around the edges so that my edges don't dry first. I'm not going too close to my edges because I don't want it to spill out on my fabric on this inside of the cover bit. Because we've come so far, I don't want to ruin it now. So I just want to make sure I've got enough glue here in my hinge area, because that's the first bit I'm actually going to do. I'm going to feather out my glue around the edge, and that's so that I know I've got good contact when I do put this down. I just get my thumb and I drag it out towards the edge of the paper. It does get a bit messy doing this, so you've got to stop and clean your fingers off before you then handle your book cover, because this glue dries very quickly. That's why I left the edges until last. All right, put it back up the right way. I'm just rolling the glue off my fingers. I'll bring the cover back in front of me, and I'm just going to line it up as best I can, middle to middle, top to bottom, and just sort of sit it there a little bit. Have a bit of a look at it. I'm going to get my bone folder on the ready. I might not need it. At this point, be careful not to overwork your paper or your cover. Making sure it's all reasonably square. If it needs to be straightened, now's the time to straighten it because you don't get much wiggle time. It stays pretty tight pretty quick. I'm just going to give it a little bit of persuasion there. Do you hear that crack? Oh, I nearly pushed through the paper. You have to be so careful. Alright, so I'm just going to now straighten it all the way out. Right, and I'm going to just encourage that hinge to go into the paper now, into the fabric. And making sure that all of that edge is flat down. And especially in this spine area. There we have it. So I'm leaving the spine area alone for a little while just to make sure that I don't rip through this paper. I don't want to do that. So now I'll go from the outside. Again, if you have this way too wet, even doing this, you're going to push the glue through from the paper back to the fabric. So being a method that I've used this without using book cloth, you do have to be very careful and always be thinking of, well, am I going to ruin it by pushing the glue through? It's fixable if you do. Everything is always fixable. We can always cover everything up because this is a blank journal cover. It's totally blank. It's ready to embellish. It's not meant to stay like this. This is just making a blank cover for you to now embellish, put your pages in, and make yourself a stunning junk journal. It's very similar to the paper cover that we done. The only difference is we used a full piece of fabric. If you can get a piece of paper that's a full piece of paper, you can do the same method here using a piece of paper. But it's not always easy to have a piece of paper that is 14 inches long. Most of the paper we have in our craft room is 12 inches long. You need 14 inches long to cover your book in one piece. And that's why fabric is a good alternative, because you can buy it by the meter. And I know that there's some beautiful fabrics out there that you can use to cover your books. And I can see this getting embellished, whether it be the spine or the cover. I'll be doing something with this, but I've got this snippet roll here. I can cut that off and put some on the spine. I'm really looking forward to embellishing this one up. I'm not sure what's going to happen with it just yet. I'll get up one day and I'll have the urge to do something with it. I'm Donna. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.